Welcome to the Bearded Finisher Podcast, your one-stop show for all things finishing and coatings. Your host, Zach, and a variety of industry experts will guide you through the art of perfecting your finishing and business game. From seasoned pros to fresh faces, get ready for tips, tricks, and trends to elevate your knowledge and business to the next level.
What is going on, everybody? Gary LeClerc. What is going on, Gary?
How's it going, Zach? I'm doing well.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show. Gary is with Stripwell. For those of you unfamiliar with Stripwell, I'm going to let him jump into it, but they make a user-friendly DIY stripper for furniture and cabinets as well, I guess. Any type of wood finish that you're trying to remove, you guys have a product for that.
Yeah, we developed it. It was actually a few years ago we came onto the market. It came out of my background in furniture restoration. I dealt with all the harsh chemicals that any pros listening know exactly what I'm talking about. The stuff that'll change the color of your skin if you leave it on too long, and
the good
cause
stuff.
all sorts of issues. So yeah, they call it the good stuff in the industry. But what we hope to do is actually create something that was actually good for not only the person using it, but also the project. Won't harm the project and won't harm the planet. So that's our goal from the beginning. And we developed sort of a DIY version of that, though pros do use it. There's a lot of pros that do use it, especially in states in the U.S. that have real strict laws when it comes to chemicals.
They're getting more and more.
It's just trickling through. So we're trying to get ahead of that curve, and it's really a passion project for me because, again, growing up in it, which we'll get into later, I guess, but I grew up in restoration. So being around those harsh chemicals for so long, I just really wanted to get away from that and move other people away from those chemicals too.
Well, let's kind of jump in. Let's hear your history, how you got into the distribution world and the chemical side. Let's have it.
Well, my backstory, I'll try to give this the short version. My dad started our business back in the 80s. I grew up around it. I was 6 years old learning how to refinish furniture with him. So I have pictures. I have actual pictures of me at 6 years old wearing a respirator. So it was pretty safety first.
That's pretty awesome. I mean, getting started early.
I know I was started young. My siblings all worked in the business too. So we grew up around it. I mean, it was crazy just every day, watching my dad restore furniture and seeing things come back to life. It's just been in my blood since, almost day one. And so then flash forward a ways, we became partners in the business. And I never thought I was going to continue. Actually, I'll jump back one step. I when I was still working with him as a job, I never thought I would continue. I was like, this is just temporary. There's no way I'm going to do what my dad's doing. I'm going to move on and do other things and whatever else. So, well, that didn't end up happening. I took over the business after we were partners for a little while. And my dad's still alive, but I took over the business and ran it from about 2010 to, just up until when we started Stripwell. And that forced me to have to kind of get out of the restoration and focus more on helping others with the skills that I had. So I did it as a job, as a career for over 20 years, about 21 years. But I did grow up around it. So many more years if you count those. But yeah, and so then I got into Stripwell, and that was sort of a funny thing. I've always been an entrepreneur. I mean, that's just been me since day one. I've never been able to work for anybody. I just love the creative process of being an entrepreneur. I love the ideas, that you kind of set your own ceiling. You wake up and you just grab life, by the horns and do what you're going to do with it. And, the sky's the limit.
Succeed or not, it's on you.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, the Stripwell came out of, it was sort of, I stumbled into it in a way. And the way that worked out was that I was actually looking to start a second business. It was going to be a service business where we would strip furniture for clients, especially DIYers, and then get it right back to them. So real quick turnaround. So it's going to be a shop set up, just ready to just knock stuff out. You drop it off, pick it up the next day kind of thing, real fast.
So just stripping and let them do the finishing.
Exactly. Because we saw that that's kind of the way that a lot of the DIYers were moving. They want to be a part of the project. They want to have their little stamp on it, but they didn't want to do the harsh chemicals and all that. So the problem with that is, as we were exploring that business model, realizing that hiring people to work that job, you're dealing with OSHA, EPA, you're dealing with a lot of regulations because you're using the harsh chemicals. And so I set out to develop kind of a secret sauce for that business. And when we developed it and it worked, just one day, and I'll be honest, this is just behind the scenes stuff. I was sitting and watching Shark Tank, like many of us entrepreneurs like to do.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, and it just hit me like it was like punched in the face. I was like, if I was ever standing on that carpet presenting an idea for a business, and I was trying to tell them about this, service business franchise thing with this secret sauce, they would look at me and say, we have no interest in the franchise business, but we do have an interest in that secret sauce. And so that's where I just took a harsh pivot and sent it out to 10 refinishers across the country that I knew personally. And I wanted to get their feedback, and they were all actually super impressed with how well it worked. And there's a little learning curve, but they were impressed by how safe it was. The fact that you could use it without gloves and it could get on your skin and it doesn't harm you at all. The fact that the fumes have no toxins in them that cause any damage to your body. But yet it still removes finishes. They were pretty amazed by that. So that's where it just took off like a rocket, and I had to make a pivot.
Any entrepreneur, most entrepreneurs know that you start off on one path. There's no straight path to success. I mean, you take the one that presents itself. If a turnoff shows up, well, shit, let's see where this one goes. I mean, that's awesome. So a little bit about Stripwell. Let's just kind of all, forgive me for my, we'll call it ignorance. So I've done plenty of stripping, use the good old fashioned, the good stuff, the solvent base that you can't even hardly buy anymore. I was able to get a drum of it when I still had my business. So, the little side hustle, selling it off to the side. Sorry, OSHA. I'm not in business anymore, so you can't come after me. But so we did a lot of lead paint removal. So there was a product, and I always got it at SW because I don't know where they got it. I don't know if they made it, but it was a stripper. It was a chemical stripper, but it came with like a paper backer that you would brush it on, put the paper on, leave it sit, and then when you peeled it off, all the paint, layers of paint would stay on the paper, so you don't have the lead being exposed. It was just an easy cleanup for lead paint removal, lead paint abatement. That way, I kind of got introduced to a product called Citrus Strip. I'm guessing that would probably be a competitor of you guys.
Yes. Yeah. That's if you're gonna list the ones that are sort of anywhere near our little world, that's one of them. Yeah. That's one that a lot of DIYers especially.
It's in the big box stores. Yeah. And so that's what I was going to kind of say. So how, as for the painters out there that may grab a bottle of that, if they're stripping a front door, trying to get the clear finish off, like how would you explain the product to someone who's never used it?
So this is where it's kind of been fun. There's an education piece whenever you introduce a new product to the market that is different. You have to help people unlearn what they've learned. So
I couldn't have said it better. That's true.
And that's tricky because some people are very stubborn and they don't want to learn anything outside of what they've known. Where it's amazing how much
stubborn. No.
Yeah, I know, right? Not me though. Not me. I'm not stubborn whatsoever. You guys, my wife. No, I just find that people once they've got habits, it's very hard. Once a craftsperson knows the paint they love, it's very hard to get them to switch a paint. Once they're loyal to something, it's partially a brand loyalty. It's partially the product. Once they're familiar with it, they don't want to have to risk a problem by switching and finding that there's an issue with one of their projects, whatever. So it's an education piece. And so when we were presenting it, we had to be very honest, and I didn't want to try to like hide the truth about it. The fact is that the good stuff is generally speaking methylene chloride based. So that's the harsh chemicals. Those are right now under huge pressure to be taken off the market across the board. I mean, it happened in consumer market, and now it's happening even in the professional market. They're really pushing. The EPA is pushing to get it completely either outlawed in a sense, or just really, really heavy regulations where it's going to be a lot harder to get it.
I mean, to be in all fairness, the stuff is brutal. Yeah. Like, it's some rough stuff. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it works. But man,
that's the thing. So the issue is you have to start to ask people some questions. I like to ask questions more than try to tell them what to think, because I don't want to tell you what to think. You're going to do what you're going to do. So I want to just kind of guide you towards what we think is good for you to consider, but ultimately it's your choice. So the big thing is I say, I compare it to sort of a person who goes and buys, say, organic eggs at the store, organic eggs versus, regular eggs, or organic chicken versus regular chicken. The price difference is much different. You'll pay a lot more for the organic, safe options because you believe in something. There's a conviction that you don't want the things that are in the cheaper versions in your life. So some consumers care about that. You see it with even things like clothing and mattresses and things in our homes, even finishes in homes, cabinets. They want to know, what's the VOCs, what's going to off gas in my house, and people are getting more and more careful about what they're bringing into their life. And so our target market initially was those people, because the guys that I knew in my industry were the old timers. A lot of them were like my dad. They were totally set in their ways, and it was going to be very hard to convince them to make the switch. But there's a young and up and coming crowd coming out of the DIY market, developing into kind of amateur professionals, and then ultimately producing almost professional level quality work as they get better and better at what they do. I wanted to get in with those people first because I believe they were the ones that would understand why we're different and why it's worth it. So that was our big thing. That what we tell people is that it was really developed for antique and vintage finishes. So if you were saying earlier, when you're stripping lead paint, I wouldn't recommend our product for that. I wouldn't say go in and try to strip lead paint with our product, because it wouldn't work as fast as you would need it to for profitability. So I'm never trying to convince you to buy it when I know it's not the right fit. Just like in your cabinet at your shop, like I have cabinets and shelves in my restoration shop. I have all different types of glues. I have all different types of finishes. I have all different types of paints. Every one of them is there for a specific job. I don't have just one. And so for me, this is, our QCS product, I don't think is meant to replace everything right now. We're working towards that, honestly. But right now, it's not going to replace everything. So it has to just be on the shelf and there for those opportunities you have to strip the finishes. It strips well. And that's the vintage and antique finishes. That's the nitrocellulose lacquers, the shellacs, the old varnishes, things like that.
Yeah.
Does
a lot of the furniture stuff that's out there.
Exactly.
And the big issue that whenever we would do furniture, even guys out there now that I know that still do furniture, the issue you run into is probably your father. The old traditional in Oklahoma, the traditional way to strip was those vats, those troughs of the liquid methylene chloride that they would dip it in. And when you start, even on like front doors, like I've noticed, solid wood front doors are a thing of the past. They're all veneers. And you start throwing that methylene chloride and start scraping off finish on some of those veneers, and it'll delaminate the veneer right off the MDF core. Yeah, it eats the glue right through that because the veneers are so thin. So I mean, with the what's the word I'm looking for? With the subtleties of the way materials are changing, I think it's always good to have those, like you said, those bullets, or those different tools in your chest and your toolbox to make sure you can adapt, because you can't even use methylene chloride on a lot of front doors anymore because it just delaminates them.
And that's the big thing, is that in restoration, my goal was always to restore something in a way where, and this is where I did a lot of work for resellers who are very particular about how the outcome would look. It wasn't just about making it new again. It was about sort of preserving the character that it had, but then giving it just a fresh look. So someone could put it in their home and it's not dirty and grimy, and it feels clean. So my goal was always to be very gentle with the furniture. I think that's more of a restoration mindset. I see on Instagram and social media, people just throw some 60 grit on a grinder and they just go crazy. And and that's usually right around the time that they learn what veneer is. That's about that moment right there. Why is it changing color?
It's so true.
It happens all the time. I mean, and I feel so bad because I know, they don't know, they're learning. And that's part of it too, is like you make mistakes, you learn from them, and that's part of the process. But the idea is trying to be super gentle across the board, gentle on yourself, gentle on the project, and gentle on the planet. And so right out of the bottle, our product is biodegradable. So you could just like dump it down the drain. I mean, we have no regulations in California whatsoever, no OSHA, no EPA. We're below all the standards of any of those things. So it's completely safe, which is a benefit, again, for a guy like myself, I had people working for me. My dad had people working for him. So when you hire, now you're not dealing with OSHA regulations. If you could switch over and make it work for your application, that's the thing. Some people won't, but if you can relearn a little bit, or unlearn, I should say, what you've done, you can adapt, and you have a lot of benefits from it, because now you're not getting the fire marshal on you. You're not getting the OSHA on you. You're not getting all that on you. And it's relieving a lot of that pressure, which is, I think, quietly on top of a lot of those shops, because most of them are trying to do what's right, but are also limited because sometimes what's right costs so much to do that they cut corners because they can't afford to do it to the level of right that sometimes those government officials want.
You tap that with you combine that with most painting companies are small operations. There's a few big ones out there, but it's like, from my time as a business operator, same thing. Furniture finishing shop. It's a service-based business. Like, you're in the world of, I can have maybe 6 employees roughly, or I've got to have 30. Like, anywhere in the middle, and you're fighting a battle that you can't win. So, and when you get into the painting world, to me, because it's unregulated. So there's not a standard on what, like plumbing or electrical, that everyone's charging, because it's considered an unskilled trade. But you get into that world of any Joe Blow thinks he can be a painter. So your pricing is all over the place. So as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, there's not a lot of capital opportunities unless you're just saving your money and not getting a paycheck to be able to invest in some of those big expenditures that come with doing stuff the right way.
Right. Exactly. And then the penalties for not doing it the right way. If for some reason someone raises a red flag, I know of a shop personally, a friend of mine, and was in the business for a long time, had someone working for him. That person got fired in a not so pleasant way because of issues going on. And that person went and reported everything he could to everyone he could to get that shop in the biggest trouble he could buy. He wanted to set it on fire, in a sense. And it really, when that hammer came down, it was like, really, because again, and that person I'm talking about, the one that owned the shop, he was trying his best to do it right. He wasn't trying to, he's now back dumping sludge into the river. He's like, that's what they used to do, not anymore. But he's trying to do it right. And I think everyone wants to do it right. Most people, I would say. But the cost sometimes to do it, the machinery, there's recycling systems and things like that, but that all cost, that's a big investment. And it doesn't necessarily, contribute to the bottom line for the company. It's all just, infrastructure stuff, for
it's all just capital overhead, what they call indirect. There's so much indirect cost when it comes to dealing with solvents. I think that's one of the other reasons, like in the painting world, water-based coatings have done very well. Granted, they're leaps and bounds better than they were 5-10 years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But the factor of the environmental factor and the disposal factor has changed a lot of stuff. So yeah, I spent 2 years in manufacturing after I got a distribution. So I was going to ask you, from the world of owned a finishing shop, furniture finishing, it's eye-opening to go into manufacturing. Would you agree to that?
It is so you have to enjoy pain.
That's a great way to put it. It's brutal.
I know. It's like, it's when it's one thing to just stay in your lane and do what you've done. And like, there's learning all along the way. I think the day that you stop learning in anything you're doing is the day that you should just pack it in. You have to be learning all the time. There's a Japanese word I love. It's in lean. I'm a big proponent of lean principles. So like the lean principles of manufacturing. So, Kaizen is a word that a lot of people who are familiar with lean would know, but it means kind of continual or constant improvement. The problem is that like constant improvement means constant work. Improvement doesn't just happen. You don't stumble into improvement. You have to work at improvement, and that's across the board at every category of everything in life. So, when you make when you're in one lane, it's one thing to just kind of continually improve and struggle through that. But then it's also to kind of switch lanes and to have to now learn a whole new set of skills, or reapply the skills you have in a different way. I mean, some of the skills can transfer some of the principles, but yeah, it was a big learning curve for me. Getting into just the shipping everywhere. I mean, we're shipping all over the world, and just all of that. I mean,
LTL rates and
yeah,
brokers and oh man, it's a mess.
yeah. And so, and honestly, that's not a lot of fun for me. That's not like, I don't wake up in the morning and go, man, I can't wait to look at some shipping rates today. That's not my, or whatever. So I luckily surrounded myself with a good small team, because again, for me, lean is about building a successful business, but that doesn't mean a big business. That doesn't mean it has to be huge. I think that's like a big misconception, is that like people think the only way to get, wealthier or to be more successful, you have to grow bigger. And I think that's a huge misunderstanding of how it all works. I think you really have to focus on eliminating the waste from your whole business model, and focus on keeping it as simple as possible for as long as possible. And that's what we're
Herman
doing.
Cain, keep it simple, stupid.
Yep.
It
Absolutely.
rings true. There's another book out there which rings a lot by what you're saying. It's by a guy named Benjamin Hardy, and he's got a book out called Who Not How. I don't know if you've read it. If you're a reader or Audible, I'm an Audible guy. It's great. It's just about understanding the principle of what you can do, what your limits are, and instead of figuring out how to do something, to do a skill, instead of figuring out how to do shipping, find a who to do the shipping for you. If you surround yourself with who's, instead of figuring out how to do everything, you can focus your time on what you're meant to do, which will result in more freedom financially, more freedom for your family. I mean, it's an incredible book.
Well, what it comes down to also is, I think for a lot of business owners, they don't reflect enough about, I would say this, I say part of life is like being an architect. You have to kind of like design the life you want to live. And most people don't take the time to think about that design. So they just kind of stumble their way through, just whatever comes their way is that's it. And there's a part of that too. You have to be an opportunist. You have to be ready to move and pivot and all that. That's true. But there's also this idea of really thinking through, like, what does it look like to have, what would make you happy? Define happy to me.
Yeah.
What is
like,
happy?
what do you want?
Yeah. Because everyone's definition of happy is different.
The core question that I ask guys all the time is, what do you want? Like if you can't answer a core question of what do you want, what's the purpose of this? Doesn't matter what anyone says about it. Just, you got to figure that's like the number one principle, your core want in life, and everything should be geared towards that.
It's funny because in business, most of the time, people who start businesses or run businesses, money is a driver. Being wealthy is the driver. For me, it's just, I'm a minimalist at heart. That's just how I am. Money to me is unappealing, and it actually kind of frustrates me most of the time. So my thing with money is the coal that I shovel into the engine. That's all it is. That's the only reason it's there. The vanity stuff, just showing it off in the community by what you drive or what you live in and all that stuff. To me, that none of that's appealing to me. My goal has always been freedom, which is a different definition. And I think most people confuse the two. I think
100%.
Wealth is freedom, and it's not. There's a lot of wealthy people who are completely enslaved to what they do. For me, freedom comes when I can spend time with my wife and kids, when I can use the abundant resources to help other people. That's, to me, is the joy of what money can bring. It's really, anything else is just fuel other than that, just to kind of keep doing other things. So
same, I agree with you 100%. Like goals, finding out what you want. Money's a tool to get what you want. The sooner you understand that money is nothing other than a tool to get you to that goal, man, it makes life so much easier. So much easier. So let's jump into, where is Stripwell right now? Like, what's your distribution look like for the guys, listeners on there that say, hey, shit, let's give it a shot?
Yeah, we distribute out of Arkansas, actually. We distribute out of Arkansas. we have my shop here in Connecticut is what we consider home base. I have a big industrial space, a commercial space. That's where I was running my restoration business out of. And so I just sort of converted that into the space that we call, the home base. But really that space is used primarily for overflow storage for us, for other products, and also for kind of research and development in a way where I still do projects, test our, new formulations on things. I post a lot of videos on social media. It's me. It's funny. People, that's just, I get a kick out of it. One time someone emailed and said, could someone call me and talk to me about, I'm having trouble. And I called them up and I said, hi, this is Gary from Stripwell. And they're like, wait, are you the Gary? And I'm like, I'm the only one. That's I'm like, but it's just funny. Social media has this way to turn people into celebrity. And that's not the way I think. I'm a guy that's done this a long time. And I enjoy talking to people about it and helping them. And, it just so happens we also sell a product. But I don't like to be a product pusher. I don't like to peddle product. I like to help people find the solution they need for whatever it is they're doing.
I mean, that's, the key principle of sales is, informing people and relationships. You're selling relationships. Byproduct can be whatever it is, but relationships is at the core of every sales.
Yeah. So we were working on an interesting distribution model. Again, this is kind of coming back from how I don't like to play by rules. So when someone tells me this is a rule, unless it actually is a rule. I mean, if the government tells me it's a rule, that's a little different. But if someone is just telling me that's not how you do it, I've been in business. I don't like to. I'll listen. I always think you should listen to people, but doesn't mean you should actually do it. So for me, I'm always thinking outside the box, and we distribute through what I call micro distribution. So we have our product manufactured in Florida, and then we have it shipped to various locations in different amounts. And it's I call it micro distribution or micro fulfillment. And so what we do is on our back end, and we're growing this out, but my goal is to sort of take the model of Amazon or of these other huge companies that have huge facilities and apply it on a very small micro level to a smaller business. So what we do is we ship a certain amount of quantity. We could track it. We know what's on those skids that go to the individual. And then right from their home, they actually pack and ship our product and send it out. So that's how we do our distribution. Because there's nothing in it that's hazardous or dangerous, like there's no regulations on it. It's different if you had a different product, but for us, we could do that. And so the goal was always to say, okay, instead of, again, lean thinking, wasteful, building buildings or renting facilities or doing that where you're throwing money away, that adds no value to the customer. That adds no value to the business. What adds value to the customer is when the product arrives very quickly. So when we're told that someone orders something from Amazon Prime and from us, and we beat Amazon Prime, that's pretty cool. So for us, it's this idea of how can we spread out and have it arrive to people faster, because we're not in retail. So we have to be able to get to people quickly. And then how can we use the business and leverage it to benefit others? So for a little while, he doesn't do it anymore, but I had a firefighter that on the side, he would fulfill for us. And so it was great because he was a family, 3 young kids having trouble making ends meet. And I was like, listen, you want to be a micro fulfiller for us? So sent him a skid of product, all of what he needs. He logs into our back end. He's assigned the orders for his area that are closest to him. And he was making an extra $500 to $1,000 a month working with us doing that on top of his other job. So he was able to help his family pay bills and things like that. So that's where you could kind of leverage business, if you think of it differently, to benefit the community, benefit people, use it for something good, not just, so that's how we do our fulfillment right now.
So how's what's the take on, as coming from the manufacturing world who sold through distribution and retail, what's the take on getting into retail? I mean, because one would think there's definitely going to be a need of the painter who needs it today. Not every, as you get into that world, or you need one more court or something to finish. Like, you guys have plans for retail?
We have plans. I'll say this: retail. I think for us, it would be more. I'll use the term boutique retail in a sense. I don't think it will be big box for us for a while or ever, because I don't think it fits our model. Part of what makes Stripwell different from every other company, like literally you can look them all up, is that me specifically, loves restoration, loves refinishing. Like I love to help our customers, not just, again, buy our product and all right, leave us alone. I love to be involved. I love to respond to people's questions beyond just the stripping process. So sometimes they say, "Hey, I just stripped it using QCS. I love that. But now, like, what should I do now?" And I love that. So for me, when you go into retail, you lose that personal touch in some cases because now you're just another bottle on the shelf. And unless you really build out an online infrastructure where people can kind of, access you after they've purchased from the big box store, then and that's possible. That's all definitely possible. But for me, I really see us being more of a personal touch type company where we really work with our clients.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think like a model that I think would work really well is going to be like independent paint distributors, or for instance, your Benjamin Moore. Like I get they're a huge company, but every single one of their distributors, like Benjamin Moore doesn't own paint stores. So they're all small business owners. So it's Benjamin Moore Paint by Jimmy's Paint or Gary's Paint. A model like that I think would be really good because you still get that personal working with that specific store owner. That would be a good one for you. And it would do really good into the contractor world too.
yeah, the contractor world is one that as we enter into that space, as we're moving that way, it's a different dynamic because like you said, when you need the product, you're in the middle of a project, you're on the job site, you need it. That's where our current model, yes, we could overnight it, yes, we could do that, but the cost of that, someone's eating that cost, someone's paying. So, and the contractor doesn't want to do that. And I mean, we have done that for our customers. If we have a loyal customer and they've ordered from us, we'll just say, "Hey, don't worry about it. We're overnighting it to you, no problem," and we'll just take care of it, and we'll just eat the cost because the lifetime value of a customer is so much. It's so important to consider.
The customer retention cost on average is 80% less than new customer acquisition costs. So you're eating an extra $15 or $20 to overnight a bottle of stripper versus trying to figure out how to get a new customer, which could cost you, there's some businesses, particularly painting. I want to say new customer acquisition in the contractor painting world ends up being around like $120 a customer is what it costs you as a manufacturer or distributor to get a customer. That ain't cheap.
Right. No. And I think that's where a lot of people who when you talk about branding and marketing, when you talk about that, that's kind of the front door. And that's great. Getting people in your front door is important. But a lot of people ignore and neglect the back door. And so the back door on a lot of these places, it's similar to like a commercial building. You have the little front door, but then you have a huge bay door in the back. A lot of times people are flooding out the back and you never know because a lot of them don't say anything. There's some people who complain and you'll be aware like, oh, so, some people are not happy. But then a lot of them just move along, never say a word, and you never know you even lost them and they never buy again. And so I've always said, for us, I would rather invest in customer service because customer service to me is one of the biggest missed opportunities in marketing. Customer service is like, if you can wow people and amaze them with your customer service, that personal touch, they will become so loyal to you that you'll have to do something incredibly wrong to really lose that loyalty. And that's the difference between a commodity and a brand, where when you're just selling a commodity, people are always looking for who's the next cheapest, who's the next that's going to run a sale, who's the next that's all they're thinking about. But when you're a brand that you have built a personality, a culture, people don't. I like
to call it an experience. A brand has an experience. A product has a price. I mean, an experience is everything. I mean, it doesn't matter when I talk to guys all the time and helping them grow their brand or develop a brand. I tell them, I'm like, so I read this book, not forced. Had this guy that read this book when I was in the corporate world, and it was called Inside the Magic Kingdom. And it's a hypothetical, it's fiction. And it's about this guy who takes like 6 people, all different walks of life, and they spend 3 or 4 days at Disney Park, seeing everything that goes behind the scenes for Disney to create the experience that they create. And he sums it up at the end, and he's like, you know, the guy teaching the class, we called him Disney Dave. He was like, so who's your competition? And, you know, convenience stores, naming all these convenience stores and big box stores for hardware and naming the other ones. They're doing that. And he was like, so what I want you to understand is anyone that provides a better experience than you is your competition. Because in today's world, when you get into the millennials, Gen Z, the younger Gen X still, it's about experience. You know, we want to see stuff. We're visual. I mean, social media, good or bad, hate it, love it, it has turned everything into being very visually appealing. But it's also kind of segued now into teaching people about the brand and the experience behind the brand, you know, where people want to see you. Part of the reason they buy Stripwell is because they've watched you and they're like, I trust this guy. You've created a level of trust with the customer. So they're like, I can call up and be like, you're the Gary? Like, I feel like I know you and your whole dang family. I mean, I get that, like, oh yeah, I saw you post that picture of your kid, you know, people comment. But that's what people want. They want to feel like they're buying from a friend. They're not buying from a big box store. That's that experience brand that people are always talking about.
I think that it's important. You said a few things I'm going to try to jump on because a lot of great stuff there. I one book I read once, it was I forget what it's called, but it's about Sam Walton starting Walmart. Can't remember the title, but anyway, in the book, he says something. He says, listen, if a Walmart comes to your town, he was like, you won't beat us. Like you can't beat us on price. That's for sure. So don't try. He says, if you're a small hardware store and we come into your town, you have to do something completely different. And he talks about, and he says, and he lists things, and he's talking about the experience. He says, you have to have little DIY classes in your store. You have to have staff that walks people through how to do everything. And because Walmart doesn't do that. Walmart is come in, get what you're going to get and get out, and you pay the cheapest price. That's a price customer. That's a customer that's purely, and a lot of our country, you know, we kind of became a price culture, you know, like whatever's cheapest, you know, and we forgot quality also matters, you know, and you know, things a lot more matters than just the price. But I like, you know, I remember hearing that, and it's absolutely true. It's like when you're in business, you have to pick the game and the field you want to play on, because if you try to play someone else's game, they might beat you only because you're playing the game that they're playing, that they understand. But when you switch the game and you focus on what your strengths are, you can create a whole different dynamic. And you mentioned, yeah, because now suddenly you're not trying to keep up with, like, for example, a power lifter is not going to run a marathon because they're not built to run a marathon. They're built to lift weights. But a marathon runner who goes and tries to lift the weights that power lifter is lifting is never going to be able to do it. So it's just two different games or two different sports. You gotta pick the one you're in and say, how do I dominate this space? What's my strengths and what do I do? Because if you focus on what everyone else is doing and you try to just copy, mimic, whatever, you're never gonna develop in anything that's you know, and likely you won't stay in business.
Play your own game,
right?
Don't go messing with someone else's game.
For sure, yeah. And so, I mean, I think that's huge. And I also think you mentioned this Disney Dave guy. So my family's a big Disney family, so that, you know, I kind of got a little excited when you brought up Disney. No, we do. No, my wife especially. No, we love Disney. We actually surprised the kids this summer with a trip. They didn't know until the day of. We literally were on a plane 2 hours after. They blew their minds. It was so much fun. But I think a point that you made without necessarily meaning to make it was that book was about Disney. Had nothing to do with your industry whatsoever. And I think that a lot of blue collar guys, a lot of the guys in trades especially, only focus on their trade. They don't actually educate themselves outside of that trade. So they become really, really good maybe at what they do, but they don't ever think outside of that. If I would talk to my dad about, hey, Dad, let's apply some of these, Disney experience things to our business, he would be like, what are you talking, like, what are you talking about? Like that there's no value in that to that person, because their mindset is they're a tradesman. They're about, doing the work. But how you do the work and how you can learn from so many different industries, so many principles that are there, it's like it changes the game completely. And that's why I think a lot of guys feel limited when they're playing a game, because they look at the guy down the road who's got 3 more guys than he does, and they're getting bigger contracts, and they're like, all right, well, we need the new van because that guy got new vans, and I need another few guys because I got to keep up with that guy. And they're just playing this game that's just going to make them, chase their tail for 20 years.
I think we've all been taught throughout life and as an entrepreneur, because you see these corporations, they get bigger, stock price goes up, CEO gets paid more, they open new stores. So it just becomes the default of, well, to make more money, I got to get bigger, and my father-in-law mentored me going into the painting business, and he did it for 30 plus years and had other businesses. But he was like, it's a really simple game. You can make more money 2 ways. You can hire more guys, or you can raise your price. So before you do either one, you've got to find out how much work you're getting, how many estimates you're doing, what your acceptance rate is. If you get 100% of the jobs you bid, guess what? You're too dang cheap. You need to raise your price. And let's say you get 50%. I'd say you're still too cheap, And he was always a big proponent of, you got to dial it back to its simplest form. It's all about, at the end of the day, it's about making money, but you don't necessarily have to get bigger. But until, circle all the way back to earlier in the conversation of, what do you want? Until you establish that, you're just running a rat race. I mean, he told me a story one time, and this kind of goes back to Walmart when he was it him? I think it was one of his partners at one time before he started the painting business. He had a goal, sell his cable to make $1 million by the time he was 30. I think on his 31st birthday, he built the first cable company in Vail, Colorado, and sold it on his 31st birthday. First $1 million. I mean, you set the goal and you go towards it. But in the meantime, I say that to say he pitched some products to Walmart to carry, because he was selling or made or distributing, got licensing for. And it kind of goes back to the experience. As you go to Walmart's massive headquarters, gorgeous place. And at that time, which was years ago, 20 plus years ago, you still meet the grand lobby. They take you around the corner into their conference room, which is T111 panel, metal folding chairs, and banquet tables, because they want you. They're setting an experience to let you know before you open your mouth, we're cheap. I mean, they do it the reverse side, but it works.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I think that when going back to the idea that, get outside of your own industry, get outside of yourself and learn. When you read that book about Walmart and Sam Walton, you realize that he was such a penny pincher. I mean, really was. And again, it's about retail. It's about setting up retail stores. But when you learn about how he would buy used fixtures and he would build out these early stores, on a really, really tight budget, but yet he still grew a giant company over time. It still led to success. When you're in that, there's this vanity piece that you think that if I'm building a business, you got to have there's got to be something visual now. I can't have the junky store. It's got to be beautiful. My first store has to be gorgeous. And then you end up using up all your capital into making this vanity filled space that doesn't actually add value to you or the customer. So it's all a waste of time. I think it's just so important to realize that it's something I say all the time. I say it over and over again. I used to be so chained down by the idea of perfection that I would be so afraid to execute something until I felt like it was perfect, or unveil something until it was perfect. And then I realized that perfection is the enemy of execution.
Just Do it.
You got to do it, because what happens is when you could get out there, I'll tell you, stepping back to Stripwell for a second, our first bottles, I was filling myself. I was capping them. I was doing all of it. I bought a little heat sealer on Amazon, and I'm heat sealing the bottles. I'm doing it all. I'm printing the labels from my printer at home on Staples shipping labels. As soon as any liquid hit it, the logo was gone. I mean, it was completely. And I remember one customer saying, he sent me a DM or an email, and he said, "Man, I love how ghetto your company is." and I laughed because I was half insulted. I have to say, I was like, I don't know, but I mean, but I knew what he was saying. I mean, he was like, "You might as well just ship it in a paper bag, like a." And but then someone else told me it doesn't matter what the label has on it or any of that stuff. If the product works, nobody cares. Nobody cares. If it works, great. Nobody cares.
It's going to look like crap in a paint van anyways.
Yeah. So what I didn't want to, this is a part of lean that I love, is this idea of rapid prototyping. So the idea is you put something out there, you get feedback. You would tweak it, you put it back out there, you get feedback. You tweak it, and you keep doing that, because eventually you develop exactly what your customers want, because they've told you what they want.
Well, I think that's the big case in a lot of these. So I worked for a company called CIC, which makes Centurion wood coatings. When I was in the manufacturing side, I ran Centurion wood coatings. And that was the part that I kept beating on and when these, I'll call them boutique wood coatings companies, very similar to you. Like, you're never going to get it right out of the first gate. I mean, this shit is going all over the country. You don't know what the temperature is in Oregon, Connecticut, Florida, Southern California, if it's got to have any heat resistance. I mean, cold. It's all over the place. Just get it out there. Take the feedback. For the first, I'd be willing to say 3 years, you've got a product in the market. You're going to make modifications to it. I mean, how many times did you guys it could be something as simple as, an additive or a co-solvent or a thickener that you find out is better, that clings better to that gives you better viscosity and doesn't fall out, blends better, doesn't drop 48 hours afterwards, all that stuff that changes in paint as you're growing, as you're scaling the company, but also you find out what works the best, because we do everything in a lab. As a manufacturer, you do everything in a lab, 77 degrees, 40% relative humidity.
Climate. Yeah, exactly.
You make it perfect, and you put that out in the real world
in a DIYer's garage at like 34 degrees it's
just get it out there and see what people think. You'll get, as one thing I've learned is painters and even DIY, they are not shy to say what they feel.
And the huge point right there under the surface. As a business, you have to be humble enough to let them tell you.
Yes.
Because if you're not humble and you think you've got the golden goose, your thing is the best, your product's the best, you don't want to hear it, you're insulted, you're offended, those negative reviews bother you, you can't let them bother you. Those negative reviews are worth more than the positive reviews. The positive reviews tell you what you think. You think all the things that the positive reviews say, The negative reviews are the things that you might be missing when they say it took, days longer than we thought it would to arrive. Oh, it didn't take off this coating, and suddenly you're like, okay, take notes, like write that down, get back into the lab, look at it.
Those are going on the whiteboard. Like, right, here's exactly. The things to improve. Yeah. It was interesting because I was in the 2K world, and as a cabinet finisher, it's all 2K solvent polyurethanes, and then water-based are trickling in, and they're great. Water-based 2K polyurethanes are great. So I was talking to, what's his name? Deal by Design. It's a furniture refinisher in Australia. I was talking to you about him offline. And one thing I was talking to him about was, I don't understand why furniture furniture restorers, it's across the board. They don't touch, most of them. We're not going to touch CVs. None of them touch 2Ks. They're all strictly precats, shellacs, high build, nitro lacquers. And I'm like, why? I cannot figure out why for the life of me you guys don't use a product that lasts longer. And he goes, and it clicked. It's like one of those click moments. He goes, 50% of my customers are repeat. I got to put a coating on that I know I can get off in 10 years when they want the piece redone. And I'm just going, holy shit. It was the weirdest click moment because we always were trying to convert those guys in the manufacturing world. They still are, trying to get them off of the Mohawk or anything solvent, trying to get them into water base. And it's like, do you know how hard it is to strip a 2K solvent polyurethane? It's damn near impossible.
Yeah.
Like, now I know why the furniture world sticks in the lacquer. They do not stray out of the lacquer because you can strip it in 10 years and you know what's on it. I mean,
the difference is that in the custom world, there have been times where I finish a project. I think I've hit a home run. It looks great. I think I've done everything exactly as it should be done. And I'm pretty picky. Like, I'm probably my own worst enemy. I'll sometimes redo a project in the shop back in the day, and the customer never knew I did it twice because I did it, didn't like it, stripped it again, and did it all over again because in the end I wanted to be, proud of what it was. Well, anyway, you do not want to deliver a 2K poly coated dining room table and then they go, oh, I just imagined it would be just a little browner, a little bit. And you're just like, okay. So what, and now they're just they just sit there looking at you and you're looking at them because the next person to talk someone's going to lose out here, and you're like, okay.
Going to cost, someone's going to be paying some money.
Yeah. I mean, so honestly, my answer to that question, and maybe this will help as you build your view of why we do what we do sometimes. I always said, I'm always thinking of the next guy. That's my answer, because in restoration, I'm very likely at best second person, but probably third, fourth, fifth person to maybe work on some of these antiques that I'm working on. And so if I do something selfishly, and this is like so important, this is like a soul check. When you're working on something, if I do something selfishly because I want to get it done faster and I want to get out of my shop and get paid, I am doing something to the next guy, to the future, that I can't rest with that. So if I'm using a glue that shouldn't be used on that project, it's just not the right glue. It's going to either fail too soon because I don't want to use, or it's too strong and it's not the right application for that job where it's going to be a bear to get apart in the future if someone has to reglue certain joints and now they're fighting what I did. I have to think of the next person. And so I know there's like a balance there of like efficiency and durability, but my thing is I think of reversibility and maintainability. So a nitrocellulose lacquer, you can rub it out. If it gets scratched, you can easily fix it. But as far as durability, it lacks there. That's what, going back to what we were saying, there's products that all have different reasons to live. I have done kitchen cabinets for customers. And at that point, I'm like, go CV, go 2K, get something that's really going to last, because the likelihood that they're going to refinish their cabinets is really slim compared to furniture. They'll probably down the road, someone will tear them out, put new cabinets in. That's, but for furniture, you have to think about the next person and a way to honor what the piece is. Now, some of the stuff that you said, the flippers, people who are just kind of taking that kind of almost throwaway furniture and doing something to it, that doesn't matter. But when you're dealing with antiques and again, I was in more mid-century furniture, and I repaired a table owned by Abraham Lincoln from the White House. Like it didn't refinish it. The leg broke off. A museum called it. That was pretty cool. I was looking for, I always say, I was looking for like a national treasure map or something. I was like, there's got to be something in here. There wasn't anything. I was hoping, but get Nicolas Cage involved, and no, so I had to fix the leg so it looked like it never happened before. But again, if no one will ever see my repair, but I know what I did, and that's the thing, is there's like an honor to restoration that I think has to be considered. It's different than manufacturing. It's just, there's an honor to anything you do. I mean, there's an integrity that you have to put your all into something. But with restoration, there's something about handling. It's like you've been given the right to handle something that was not your design. It wasn't your build. Your job is to honor it and restore it back to what it should be, not what you think it should be, not what it should be. And if the client tells you otherwise, that's up to them. You have to obey what they say, but for the most part, it's doing it the right way as it should be.
That's a great outlook on the furniture restoration. It's been interesting as I've kind of dove into the furniture restorating world, like it's on the podcast and talking to guys. Like, I think there should be, and I was telling Aaron with Moore's Refinishing, I'm like, you should be the one that starts this, Aaron. Like, somehow, whether it be like, I know a guy but you have to modify the furniture a little bit, and he does, he puts coins with his logo and everything hidden. You can't see it in all of his kitchens and when he builds them. It was like something like where you could burn on the back of the door that had your logo that was kind of like a stamp over time if like antique restorers would take it on, whereas an inconspicuous spot that only the next refinisher would take it apart and be like, oh, Aaron did this one. Hey, Aaron, what'd you do on this one? I'm refinishing this one or something, just to kind of like, you could see a lineage over time of how many times it was refinished. If finishers just did like a burn where they burn their logo in it every time it was redone. So, I mean, 100 years down the road, you see all these different logos that are on the backs or the undersides of a drawer or something where it was redone. I think that would be,
Well, I mean, it would be only something today that would be usable, but down the road, who knows what's coming, but would be something like a QR code would be pretty cool.
Yeah. QR code would work.
You could scan it and it's someone actually showing the process of what they did to it. Where then, but again, down the road, who knows, technology and things change so fast, whether or not that, people be like, what is this, square?
What are all these square dots?
Yeah.
Like, what the hell is this?
But no, and I think that's what it comes down to. And I think that's where, again, in the restoration world, once you have customers who trust your judgment, trust your technique, it's very hard to lose the loyalty. That, the retention rate's huge. My dad, when we were in business, I mean, up until I finally closed, and it was weird to close at this point.
Okay, I was going to ask if you still had it.
Well, I dabble, but Stripwell's taken my, again, I was caught off guard. Stripwell, to be, again, full honesty, I was just thinking, this is just going to be a little side thing. I mean, it's like, how could we ever, but it took off. Like, I just couldn't imagine how fast it gained traction. Social media took it, ran with it. And we were all over social media, all the influencers that were doing furniture, because my marketing, I had no marketing budget. When I started, there was no budget for Stripwell. I didn't start with any capital investment. I didn't go and get a loan. I said, I negotiated terms with our manufacturer so that I could sell the product before we had to pay for it, because I didn't have it, I made it work. I mean, I did all the stuff you hear on the Shark Tank and you hear these, I did all that. And it was just kind of came natural, but it was this kind of hockey stick. Like, it just took off to where every month we were, doubling or tripling in sales just continuously. And it was nuts.
That's awesome. Nuts. Congrats on that.
Thank you. Yeah, it got to a point where I was like, you know what, the restoration thing, plus I have 3 kids at home. My wife was pregnant and we were going, there's a lot of stuff going on in that window of time too, personally. So it was like, this gives me an opportunity to back away from leaving and going somewhere else and doing the hours, because, again, I grew up in the mindset of exchanging hours for dollars.
Yeah, service based,
which most people are in general, but then also most blue collar tradesmen are focused on trading, or trading their hours for dollars. So the problem is that you're limited. You're your own ceiling. If you've got 40 hours a week, great. If you can push it to 60, great. You made more money, but you also lost freedom, which, again, we were talking earlier. I don't want to lose the freedom part. So you start to have to shift that sliding scale. But then when you start to exchange something else for dollars, so an item, a commodity. I mean, I wake up and there have been sales through the whole night. I've been asleep. I've done nothing. It's just been, but you're planting seeds, and as you're sleeping, those seeds are growing. So the goal of an entrepreneur is plant, 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 plant. That's all that, the harvest comes if you plant and you water and you nurture. If you focus on the harvest too much, if you focus on the outcome too much, you're focused on the wrong thing. You should focus on getting those seeds in the ground and keeping them healthy and watering them and getting them to grow right. And then the harvest will come.
I call it the 90-day rule. I mean, if you're slow now, and I talk to guys who are in the business and they're like, man, I don't have any work. I'm like, what were you doing 3 months ago?
Right.
I had a big
Right.
project. I wasn't doing estimates. That's why you're slow right now.
Exactly.
You know, what you're doing
Yeah.
now comes to harvest in 3 months, 3 to 4 months.
Exactly. And that's tough. I mean, I will say when I left the refinishing business, the restoration business, when I sort of stepped out of that, I had a year-long waiting list all the time. 1 year. All the time, which means my prices were probably too low. Going back to that, it was probably, because but I learned something today. I was too cheap. No, I had a year long waiting list, and I had work. I mean, all through COVID, all that, most businesses were, everything was drying up because nobody could be. I still had people dropping stuff off with masks outside my shop. I'd bring it in, I'd work on it. Then we did it, and I was able to coast through COVID. So I say coast. It didn't feel like coasting at the time, but in comparison to some, it was just I wasn't fighting to find the work, because I had a mentor tell me once that first you build your reputation, and then your reputation builds you. And I think that there is a process to business where you can't focus on how much can I get from the customer? What can they give me? How do I benefit? That's an I focus sort of mindset. And that works for some people. There's some really very successful, selfish type people out there. I mean, that's part of business too. But I believe that you focus on your reputation, you focus on the quality, the care of your customer, you focus on all the things that matter, and word of mouth will spread. Your brand will grow stronger. And it won't happen overnight, but it will happen where suddenly there's like a tipping point. There's a pivot where you are kind of fighting to get business, but then suddenly it just starts to find you constantly. And you're not even seeking it out. It's like you're like a magnet, just kind of attracting customers to you without even much effort.
So how long have you been doing Stripwell full time?
Full time? It's been 3 years now.
What did you guys any idea around about how many bottles you guys sold last year?
Oh, we sell different sizes, so that makes it tricky too.
Roundabout. I mean, if you can give out revenue if you want. I don't always like to have guys give out revenue.
Yeah, I don't know how many bottles. That's a good question. I'll say that we're down from previous years a little bit, but that's just because we've gone through some. That's the other thing is in business, you're always kind of like investing capital, and you're always refocusing. You're not always going to just keep climbing. That's not possible. You go through ups and downs, and when you look at the graph, 10 years later, you realize you have gone up over the course of that time, but you have ups and downs.
You cannot, and that's the hardest part that I tell manufacturers that I work with now that I help. You will not grow 10% a year every year for 10 years. It will not happen. You will have a correction year. You got to prepare. It's not a linear graph. Your sales are never going to be linear. I mean, you will have corrections. You're going to have down years. It'll happen. You just adjust. What did you change from that year to the next year, and then pivot back or pivot a different direction? But thinking you're going to be the next Amazon. I mean, everyone wants to be the next Amazon, but I guarantee you, we both know that Amazon probably had some hella correction years.
No, I could say this. I'll step back to the beginning, because the beginning was kind of the fun part, when it was sort of this wild new idea, and I'm just kind of, that's the fun. When you're an entrepreneur, that's the part you love, actually.
Building a business is the best.
Yeah, I mean, down the road, my hope and dream is that I can actually help consult young people like I was trying to do what I was doing. Because I mean, it's been my whole life. Even when I was in my 20s and high school, all those years, I was always thinking about something I could build or develop. And to have someone to kind of walk alongside that would kind of understand, that's huge. I didn't have a lot of that. I had some, but those first few months, it was wild, because so we developed the formula and it worked, which was important. And and once it worked, I remember trying it on stuff, and I'm like, because we tried all different ones. We were trying different formulations, and we were, and finally, I just remember the day that the finish just came off, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm like, it actually did exactly what it needs to do. And we put it out there, and I remember I was home with my kids. It was during kind of the end of COVID at that point. So there was still COVID stuff going on at schools. If your kid got COVID, you were out for 10 days, or, that kind of stuff. Well, anyway, they were home, and I had to be home because at the time my wife was a teacher. So I had to be home because I'm when you own your own business, everyone thinks that you could just, make your own time doing whatever you want. But so I was home, and I remember building out our first website on my own. I hit live, and that first day we did $500 in sales. And I was like, wow. I'm like, that's pretty cool. Like, up until that point, I was just invoicing people with email and like
this
selling,
might actually work.
Yeah. So that first month we did 10 grand in sales. Very first month. And I was like, wow.
That's impressive.
I was like, that's pretty great. The next month we did 11. So I'm like, all right, cool. Incremental. That's not huge. Then we did 33, 67. This is month after month. I think it was 80 or 90 the next month. 100. I mean, it was just like this. Like I said, it just took off because all over social media, I never foresaw this, which is funny because I would love to say that I could see the path and perfect strategy executed. I wish I could say that. I can't say that. You do your best and you stumble into stuff. I never imagined that 87% of our customer base would be women and mostly stay-at-home moms who are doing this out of their garage.
Yep, as a little side hustle. Yeah.
I never thought of it. And I also didn't realize that during COVID, there was a giant influx of that customer base because everyone was stuck home and everyone decided, well, what can I do from home? And they did it either for the fun of it or for the side hustle because they're home anyway. So like, the timing was just perfect. And that customer base just took us because that customer base, they love to share online what they love, their recipes, their home decor, their whatever, their kids' favorite this or that. They love that stuff. And I was so fortunate, and we were so fortunate as a business that community was so kind to us. I think that the relationship we built with that community, they knew that we weren't just a corporate company trying to just peddle a product, but that we really cared about the well-being of that community. And they did a lot of heavy lifting for us
That's amazing.
I can never thank them enough because when you have an influencer with 600,000 followers and you say, listen, I can't pay you anything, but I'll send you a bottle if you'll say something. That'd be awesome if you like it. Don't lie.
Tell me first.
I said I'm never paying anyone to lie. Either you like it or you don't, and that's the way it works. And they would put it out there, and I would just watch the second that reel went live from that influencer. From suddenly sales just boom, like every second, just bam, 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 bam. I mean, it was wild. It was from the back end of it. It was just wild to see what that kind of community can do when you really get them on your side.
I mean, the power of social media. I tell guys all the time, it was still new when I had my business. I mean, it was out there. I mean, social media was out there, but the whole mindset of using social media to propel your business, not just to talk to your fellow finishers. And I don't know if marketing in social media, like paid ads, wasn't huge yet. It was still like in the, the very tip of it. Everyone was just starting to barely dip their toes in. But man, I mean, the power of social media marketing is just, I mean, there's guys that are doing incredible things with it now. I mean, I wish, short of starting a business again, and I really don't want to do that because I don't want employees, like what you could do now with social media marketing is just nuts.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun because really marketing is I've always said all it is communication. If you're good at communicating, you could be good at marketing. If you're good at sharing with people something that you're passionate about or love, if you care about people too, I mean, that's a big piece of it. There's a lot of marketers out there that'll just feed. I mean, there's so much trash all over the internet, just ads for everything under the sun. And a lot of it's not worth it. But when you really believe in something and you can communicate why you believe in it and why someone else should, I mean, it's just an amazing world. I remember when I got in with my dad, we didn't have a website back then. That was when websites were the thing. Like that websites were up and coming.
Yes.
I remember that day where I'm like, Dad, I think we need one of these website things, and it was right before, I think it was, we were probably late in the game. I'm making it sound like it was in the 90s. This was in 2007, I want to say, maybe 2006, somewhere in that range. But it was right before the big recession. It was right in that time. And there was all these warning signs about the economy and problems are coming. And I'm like, I think we need a website. I think we need to get out there and put something up. So we had someone build us a website because there wasn't any like make your own things.
10
And
grand, 20
yeah, right.
grand. Yeah.
And all it was a, you know, real simple flyer, but it started to generate work for us. And I remember we did that. And yeah, I mean, it's wild because I think back at how you had to do business back then versus today, and how you can directly communicate with people now, like in real time. I mean, I can put up a post and in a second someone can contact me, DM us, we can write back, we could get on it's like so fast.
So instant. My father-in-law, who mentored me a lot, I've asked him, what's the number one thing? Because he's always been an entrepreneur his whole life. He's 72. I'm like, what was it? What was the number one thing that changed the game in being an entrepreneur and having your own business? And he, to this day, it's like the invention of the cell phone is hands down I don't care. He's like, I don't care. Hands down, the best invention ever is the invention of a cell phone. And it's, you know, gotten better, but, you know, like bag phones that were attached to your car. He's like, I used to have a phone that was in the truck, had installed, and I'd be up on a roof painting a house, and it was wired that when the phone rang, it would honk the horn and flash the lights.
That's awesome.
So you're on a ladder.
That's awesome.
Honk, flashlight. You didn't have to get down, go answer the phone. But he's like, before that, I'd go paint for 8-9 hours a day, come home, and I'd have 20 calls. I'd be on the computer till 10 o'clock at night, returning voicemails, mapping out estimates for the next day because you had to print your maps out or map it out what you're going to do. He's like, when cell phones came out, it was just.
Oh yeah. I think about my dad. As I was thinking before we got on today, just about, because sometimes you don't stop and like look back enough. And I was thinking about my story with my dad, and I just imagine doing business when he started. I mean, back then you had your phone. The things of value then was your yellow page ads and your phone number. That was, I mean, that was it. If you had a phone number and a yellow page ad, those were your go-to. But then, I mean, he would work all day long and then have to go out and do estimates at night. There was no way of weeding out tire kickers, you know, people who are just, you had to go and physically drive to them and find out that they're wasting your time in person. And now,
and typically you still did the estimate when you went to do that. You
still did it, all that. And then they would just say, that's too, I found someone who was cheap or whatever. And you just, so much waste. And again, it's from someone who now is passionate about like elimination of waste. I think about, my goodness, what a change. I mean, when you needed a product, think about finishes. When you needed a product, you either had to go to the local store, and that's what they carried, like whatever the paint store was, or you had to have a catalog, a physical catalog. My dad had a stack of catalogs next to his chair growing up.
The old Granger.
All the woodworking catalogs, all the finishes. And he would just sit there flipping pages, trying to find the thing he needed to order. And I mean, now you can just Google and boom, you have everything you can imagine. If someone asks you for a quote, you say, yeah, shoot me a text. We'll talk about it right now. They send you a picture and you talk to them on the phone. It's amazing. I mean,
there's now, I had a guy on and I just put an ad out put a reel out for him. He's with a company called Drip Jobs. His name's Tanner. Painting contractor, developed a software, kind of like you, Saul Need, developed this software. And he's had guys working on this software and he's got this thing so dialed in. He can create a link. The customer can go fill out this entire deal, upload pictures, put their budget in, address, everything. You send it, a customer fills this out from your website, from your social media page. Within like an hour, it says, oh, thank you. It emails them back. Thank you for this. We got it. We're reviewing it. Let's go ahead and get you on the calendar. Gives them a calendar link. You set up your share calendar. You set up when you do estimates, what days, what times, all these peripherals in there. It looks at your calendar to see if you have anything else booked. Customers giving you all the data. They're booking their own appointment. All you got to do is drive over there and close the deal. I'm like, holy crap. So much automation.
I know it's just a different time. I mean, it's wild to think where 10 years from now or 50, or 20 years from now will be. I mean, the next big thing, it seems, is the AI movement. Everybody's doing stuff with that now, which is also pretty mind blowing. Some of that is pretty outrageous, you know.
Estimating is going to be insane once AI can pull Google Maps and get your exact square footage and tell you what the whole exterior of the house costs to repaint or whatnot. I mean,
I know it's going to be pretty wild, but yeah, I think that's the key. I mean, I think people buy things, spend money when they either really need it or really want it. Those are really the only two reasons people buy things. And so, you know, to start a business, like, you know, I don't know what your podcast listener demographic is, but if they're, you know, probably a lot of business owners, but also if anyone is, you know, just thinking of starting businesses, it's like, it's not as hard as I think a lot of people think it is. It is hard to do it, but it's, you know, in some ways, but it's also just thinking about everyday life with a fresh set of eyes and saying, what is it that really bothers me? What is something that is a stress point for me? And if you can solve some of that, you're probably not the only one who has it. There's a company in Washington State called FastCap. I don't know if you ever heard of them. Have you heard of FastCap? Yeah. So Paul Akers is the owner of FastCap, and he's a big lean guy too. But they're all, most of their products, whether they were developed in house, if they weren't, they were developed by guys on the ground, by tradesmen, and they have a whole system there where if you have an idea, you can contact them, present your idea, and if they like it, they'll bring it to market, and you'll get a royalty payment. So you don't have to actually run this new company; they'll make it a part of their offering. But so, you know, their products are really innovative because they're made by guys who actually understand what the need is. You know, I had a friend's dad growing up was a carpenter, and he was like the stereotypical old school carpenter.
yeah.
And I don't know if I have to describe what that looks like. I think, you know,
I think everyone on the show knows that.
He didn't pull punches. He said it how it was, and that was it. And he would get so frustrated. You see him working on something, and he was like, oh, he would get angry, and he'd be like, this was designed by another one of those overeducated college idiots, you know. And what he was saying, I'll say it differently, was that a lot of things we handle in the trades were developed by people who have never swung a hammer.
Engineers.
Yeah,
God
they're
love
just
them.
people who think about it. And it's important because they have an angle to it that they bring to the table. But there's something about when you're on the ground doing something and you realize, man, if I only had this thing. But here's the problem is most guys don't value their ideas enough or themselves enough. And they think, well, no, I forget it. And it just dies on the vine. You know, they don't explore it. The guys who do explore it sometimes find that they have a whole new opportunity in front of them.
Yeah. Well, like you were saying when you said a minute ago about a lot of people get kind of scared about starting a business, and it's not that, you know, and I reigns true what you said. It's not that difficult. It can be a little tricky, but I saw a kind of like a mentor that I kind of talked to on social media. I've never met him, but they say the number one trait in entrepreneurs, it's just above money, above influence, above, you know, intelligence, the number one trait that almost all entrepreneurs have: perseverance. The number one trait that's common among all entrepreneurs, highest above everything else, is perseverance. They just don't quit. That's the number one deal. So and I tell guys this: if you're going to do it, just do it. Make the commitment and do it. Whatever you do, don't stop.
Yeah, you got to be willing to take a punch, and
you're going to get knocked down. It's going to happen. I mean, but just keep going. If you keep going, you'll come out on the other side and you'll be a better entrepreneur and you'll be very successful.
Yeah. I was just talking to someone the other day, and we were discussing how the just do it mindset, that's not a shout out to Nike, but just do it, was this idea that a lot of people get so hung up with, unless, and we sort of mentioned this earlier, if they can't do it exactly the way that they want to do it, they don't do anything. And I'll bring up, you mentioned Aaron Moore earlier. He's a great guy, and he just released his book not too long ago. Anyone can write a book, but writing it is the hard part. Like that's the thing. Like, you have to actually say, okay, I'm going to sit down and do the work. And he worked I think he says 18 months on that book. He wrote and he chipped
That's a
away
great
at it
book.
because he was, yeah, and he did a fantastic job. I mean, the all across the board, the content's great, the photography's great. It's quality. It's a quality item. It's really a tool. And I've told anyone that I can is like, you should get that if you have the opportunity, because it's a really great reference. There's not a lot of them out there. You have to kind of find old books that are references.
Yeah,
to
I mean, The
restoration.
Art of Woodworking or Wood Finishing is a book that's been out for years, but it is the most god awful book to read. It's mind numbing, but his book is interesting.
Yeah, and things change too. There's new products and new ideas, and there's just new problems to solve. That's why books have certain shelf life. You know, there's certain principles that are timeless, but there's some things that have a shelf life, and they do change as technology and things change. But his book, I mean, he sat down and did it, and that's the difference a lot of times is between someone who actually has something and someone who doesn't. It's just that person decided to get up and just do it. They just started again planting seeds, and you have to be willing to wake up knowing your plan. I used to go and make videos at the shop to sell Stripwell, to sell QCS when we had like 100 followers on Instagram, and I would have a piece of furniture there that I knew that when I finished it, I had a guaranteed paycheck, but for some reason in me, that video felt more important. And I may have been wrong, but I don't think I was, because every time I made a video, every time I put myself out there, it built a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And
it builds that brand trust.
Exactly. It eclipsed so, in the moment, that $1,000 project sitting in front of you seems like that's guaranteed money. But an entrepreneur often thinks like, well, I know that's the guaranteed money, but what am I not seeing?
Yeah.
And that's there's a line there where
what could it be?
Yeah, and so and that can lead to some epic failures, and it can also lead to some epic success, because you're willing to roll the dice that much. You're like, you know what? I just believe in myself enough to know that if I put my all into something, I can do it. I can do it.
I was watching an interview with the Dallas Mavericks owner. I won't keep you too much longer. I just brain farted on his name. He's in, God dang it, the guy that owns the Mavericks. He's on.
Oh yeah, the Shark Tank.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm drawing a blank.
Sweet, it's not just me. I call him brain.
I can picture his face. I can't say his name right now. Mark Cuban.
Mark Cuban. So he was doing an interview in Dallas and with young college kids, and he said something that just rung true to me. He's like, guys, Nike says it. The whole theory is you don't want to go work out, but just go do it. Just do it. He's like, you're going to fail, and you're probably going to fail miserably. But guess what? It only takes one success. You can have 100 failures. It only takes one success. And you could be up here with more money than I got. You just got to keep going. I mean, and I'm just like, holy crap. I mean, that reigns very true. And you got someone like that worth $5 billion that's made some smart decisions, but he'll admit it. I got lucky. Took one success.
I just posted yesterday on the Stripwell account on our Instagram. It was just a little blog post, but it was this idea of turning crap into fertilizer. That's a Garyism. I think I always say this. I don't know if anyone's else said it this way, but I have gone through in my life, personal and in business, a lot of crap, a lot of hard stuff, a lot of real life stuff, hard stuff. And there is no value in that hard stuff if you don't turn it into fertilizer. If you don't convert it into something that feeds your future, or not just you, but also other people, because sometimes your failure will simply be you talking to someone someday, telling them your failure and preventing them from having that same failure.
What's funny is the place I used to work, they had we had a lab tech, been there forever. His name was Gary. And he would say random stuff just about like that when you think about it, you're like, holy crap. And we called them Garyisms. So as soon as you said that, I'm like, oh, I haven't thought about that in a long time.
What you were just saying too, my son is huge into the Mr. Beast character. Mr. Beast on YouTube? Oh yeah,
my son is huge into
most people. Well, when you know his story, what's wild, he wrote the introductory to a book I read once, and he said how if you want to start doing YouTube, he was like, just make 100 videos, just do them. He's like, they're gonna be mostly garbage. He's like, the first 100, just get them out of your way. Just do them, because in doing it, you learn, and you start to get better and better and better. And now you look at this guy who I don't know exactly when he started, but he was in, high school maybe when YouTube first came out. And now he has a show on Amazon. He has all these deals. He's the largest YouTuber in the world. It's crazy.
He's actually on the short list with Elon Musk and Larry Page that TikTok is actually open selling to for 55 billion.
Wow.
And he's one of the guys that could buy TikTok. Yeah. And you're like, videos.
Right.
Just takes one.
It's just, he just kept showing up. And if again, my son goes through and watches all these videos and makes me watch every one. Some of them are fun. Some of them are just, I call it like brain candy. It's just like, you watch them and it's just like, but some of them are actually interesting. And again, it's not in my industry. I'm not a YouTuber gamer guy. That's not me. But there's principles everywhere you look, everywhere that you look at it and you can learn something. And I think we just have our eyes closed so much. We walk around and we're thinking about our little, I got to go to work, got to do my job. I got that quote to do. I've got to do this. And you're just so tunnel vision. And if you open your eyes, there's just learning everywhere. And stuff can be applied,
You're killing me because my son's always trying to get me to watch those videos. And I always tell him, no, you're saying that. I'm like, God damn it.
Well, and also
probably
part
need
of it
to
is,
sit down and watch one or two.
Growing up, I had a dad who was a great dad, but he also was someone who I could only engage with if I was I had to engage with what he was doing, So if he was working on a car, I could go and change oil with him and we could engage. But if I was interested in something, it was hard for him to engage. So that's a little dad tip. It's like sometimes it's saying, you know what, let me engage where they are, even if it hurts my brain. I want to stick an ice pick in my forehead. Because some of that stuff is just like, I'm like, oh my goodness.
I just don't get into YouTube. Like my son loves watching everything on YouTube, and we had to kind of cut him off because I don't know. The stuff he was watching wasn't bad, but he's 7. My son's 7.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
my son has just turned 7.
He'll watch, I can't remember, some of the video game guys, and then he starts yelling at every time he's playing a video game, starts mimicking those guys. And it just makes me want to throw him out of a window. So I'm like, all right, we got to cut this off for a little bit to see if your attitude gets a little different or you don't start mimicking these guys. Yeah, that's the rough part.
Everything in moderation.
Yeah.
Everything in moderation.
Everything is
not
like,
too bad.
In that young generation, everything is just like, you got, because I'm old as shit, you got a mushroom on Mario and it's like screaming and jumping up and down because you hit a box and got a mushroom. Like that's the level of over excitement or whatever you want to call it. And it's just like, no. But I guess you're right. I need to get more on that level. See, learning stuff. Well, I don't want to keep you too much longer. I know we kind of went over a normal hour, but it happens. Great conversation. One of my favorite questions that I like to ask everybody who comes on the show is the theory and the whole premise behind the show to me is introducing my community, the finishing community, whether it's entrepreneurs, painters, contractors, restaurateurs, to the people behind the companies and who they are and developing that relationship. So I don't know if you've seen any episodes, but I always like to ask, what's one thing about Gary that might surprise us, or a hobby when you're not running a business? What's life for Gary?
What is life for Gary? Well, before becoming a refinisher, I was a drummer, played the drums.
Oh, okay.
And always thought I'd be a touring musician. That was my aspiration. I was going to tour the world. And that's it's pretty funny to think back. That was my thing. But even then, I look at the entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, to be in a band, there's so much of that, even just being in a band, And
so do you still play?
I still play. Yeah. Not as much, but I do still play.
That's pretty awesome.
It's that's probably one of my favorite hobbies, or something about being I would say next to being in a spray booth doing finishing with, just suited up with some earbuds in. There's something really tranquil about that for me, that kind of, you're just kind of cut off from the world and you're just, I would say next to that, being behind a drum kit, is a very similar feeling. You're just sort of in a zone, and there's something about, if you're a creative person, which probably a lot of your listeners are, there's, it when you hit that creative zone where everything goes quiet, and you're just like, it's like you're just in a room by yourself, and it's just like your brain just hits another gear, and there's, and with so much noise in the world, it's like, it's hard to find those moments where I have 3 kids at home, a wife, I run a business, I have all this stuff going on. It's hard to find those moments where you're just,
I know exactly what you're talking
zone.
about. Yeah. That's pretty awesome, man. Well, Gary, man, I greatly appreciate you agreeing to come on the show. I think this has been an awesome episode. I really like to get out, stay in the painting, but also get out of it. Talk about life, talk about business, because a lot of the guys that are on the show are looking to grow their business, trying to find out, if they're in the right business or whatever that may be. We've had get a lot of feedback that this one-on-one, just hanging out, has been very helpful for a lot of the guys out there, especially when you're rolling walls. Put your earbuds in and spraying and just zone in. I mean, that's pretty good. Last piece of advice you'd give to anybody looking to start a business.
I would say we kind of touched on it a few times. I think you have to reverse engineer. So you have to start with what you want. I think that I'll try to keep it short, but I think too many times we picture our future and we get disappointed when the picture doesn't match reality, when we don't get to the picture. Where I have started to focus on attributes or feelings, emotions that I want to feel in the future. So the picture doesn't matter as much. It's really what I want to feel when I get to that point. And so I don't get hung up on exactly how it happens. It's more so, these are the things I like. These are hills I'm going to die on. I am not going to neglect my kids for the sake of making more money. It's not going to happen. I will make less money. I think when you start there with principles and keep it super simple, like you said, keep it simple, stupid. Don't overcomplicate it. Just say, these are things I do not want to give up, and these are things I really want to have. And then reverse engineer that. Figure out advice, what it takes to get there. Because if you just start without that target, without that mindset, you can just flop around a lot, and you have a lot of false starts, a lot of failures you didn't maybe need to have. And you just realize that it's sometimes just that self-reflection, to be quiet your mind, think about what it is you want to be and what you want to feel in the future.
Yeah.
And
have a vivid vision of the future. That's a great one, man. That's awesome. Well, again, thank you for coming on. Thank you for all the good advice you gave. Let's circle back and maybe get you on another episode and kind of see how things are going, see how distribution's going. I'd love to kind of document your success and see how things have, that road to success, how it's moved along the road. I think it's a really interesting one. All right. Thank you guys for listening. Every Monday, new episode coming out, and we'll see you next week.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the Bearded Finisher Podcast. We thank everyone for joining. Keep hustling, keep learning, and never settle for anything less than your best. Remember, the path to perfection is a journey, not a destination. Until next time.